Okay, 1 second, says Forbes. I can live with that. Oh, while we're at it, keep it real. Keep it real, real. God, I'm so scared. I'm so scared.
Welcome to the Free the Bear podcast, a podcast devoted to California independence, where two guys talk about how crappy the government is and how dumb politicians can be, and that there might be another way. So sit back, enjoy, and as always,
Free the bear. Grrr.
All right. Gosh, good to be talking to you. Sorry about the crazy delay. It was a wild night.
What are you just rambling about? Who are you talking to?
What do you mean?
I wasn't even in the meeting. It's just all of a sudden you're just like talking. It's like, oh, it's a wild night. Wild night what?
It is a wild night, Forbes. First of all, the California National Party meeting went overtime. And then there will be times where it's 20 minutes for this computer to start. And I'm just like, shouldn't we live in an era where my computer works as well as my phone when it comes to gathering information?
I definitely would think so. You know, the thing, I mean, I don't want to be like one of these kind of Apple fanboys, but we've been using Macs and we have not had any of the virus issues whatsoever that the PC market has. I mean, it's like really like 9-day. Like we're always using PC laptops and PC whatever for like the longest time. And like when we switch over to Macs, like I'm literally using a Mac Air from like 2012. 2011. It's still working exactly the same. Like again, I just got it yesterday. I mean, it's dirty as hell. You know, I scuffed it up. You know, there's stickers on it. It's like, you know, kind of busted into seams. But again, it's been working just fine. It boots up like without a problem. I never had to brought it in once.
Yeah, I've used an Apple before, and Mac. I love them. I'm by the way the most technologically inept person. So like,
I'm sure I could beat you on that one, but
like
yes.
anything beyond surfing the internet is like a struggle. I watched for the first time last night the movie Snowden, and I didn't realize he was such a badass computer hacker and like commando dude. He should just be allowed in this country because he's badass. I don't see what the fuss.
A ranger or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, his legs were like, he had bad legs. Like his legs disintegrated, so he had to be out of special forces. But like, dude is like Angelina Jolie in Hackers. Like the guy is like, it's like
well, yeah,
ultimate weapon.
You know, I can just tell you something. Like, and I just always am upfront with people about this. I know, especially in our kind of like, we'll just say general left wing circles. You know, Snowden is kind of held up as kind of like a hero. I actually really don't believe that whatsoever. I think it's one of the biggest, lack of a better term, one of the biggest snow jobs in U.S. history. The reason why I'm saying this is that Snowden did prove, obviously, that there was an illegal NSA program that was spying on everyone. That's 100% true. But it's kind of the same thing as saying like the, who was it, the Rosenbergs who gave the secrets of the H-bomb and the A-bomb to the Soviets. It's like kind of like saying like, well, those people, like, you know, they proved that civil rights violations were happening all through the United States. Yeah, that's true, but there really was some kind of intelligence operation there. I can't go against, or I you know, again, like I hate to be in the same company as pigs like Hillary Clinton and some of the right-wing establishment, but it doesn't make sense to me why a guy who was, again, connected with the NSA, who decided to, his first stop to talk to one of the reporters was Hong Kong, which is Chinese territory, and he was basically interrogated by the Hong Kong police, which I'm sure would have been connected with Chinese intelligence. And then his second stop is Moscow. It's not like he ran to like Cuba or like Venezuela, which is like, you know, outside the perimeter of like, you know, of the, you know, basically like U.S. imperialism, but at the same time, not really like an existential threat to the United States. He didn't do that. His first stop was Hong Kong, and that always was like sense of a red flag to me. And then him stopping off at Moscow, none of that really makes any sense. I know people try to explain that away constantly, but there was other routes. Like, for example, Julian Assange went to, what was it, the Salvadoran embassy?
Yes.
Yeah, so the Salvadoran embassy, like, they took him in. Again, El Salvador was obviously not a threat. Actually, still pretty much in the U.S. orbit no matter what, but it was not like first stop Hong Kong. And then it's just like, oh, I have like 3 laptops on me. Well, okay. I have the 3 laptops on me. There you go, guys. Whoops, I have to get interrogated by the police because they know exactly where I am. Whoops, my first stop was Hong Kong again, which again, I know like some people were trying to explain away as like, well, at the time it was like, it was autonomous. Not ever really was. The moment the Chinese took over, it was not really autonomous anymore. They let them get away with, local politics and like, some English common law stuff. But that was never the case. They were always been infiltrated and like, they had their intelligence services all over the place. And a guy like that showing up, they immediately got to him. And then the second stop was really Moscow. Like really, he couldn't have flown anywhere else, like Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, for example, Ortega. I mean, like there was a lot of other places he went to, but he went right to the doorstep of like, these countries that are pretty much not on the same side as the USA. And then again, I have mixed feelings about all this stuff because again, USA does a lot of horrendous crap, but your stopover is Moscow, really, and then he never tried to leave after that. And again, was he captured basically? And if he was captured, then all of the stuff he's kind of putting out there becomes extremely questionable at this point because he's under duress. If you think about it, even if he wasn't thinking about like going to Russia just for whatever kind of payment or operation he was working with, the fact is that. If he's in Russia like that, he's under duress. So everything he says from that point forward has to be considered suspect. Because Putin will throw you out a window and poison your family. So,
yes, he will.
Yeah, so again, like at that point, even if he wasn't an asset, which I think he was beforehand, because again, the Hong Kong stop, then the Moscow stop, if he wasn't an asset of them, he definitely has to be now because there's no way he can survive without them. So again, you're just talking. You basically like when he goes up to like Joe Rogan and stuff. I think people are thinking it's just like, oh, he's just going to tell us like 100% what he's thinking and like is this a clear communication? No, there's probably guys in the background ready to break his knuckles the moment he says something that's off script. So whatever he says at this point has to be considered suspect. I know again, it's just like U.S. government is completely full of pigs and terrible people, but you have to understand that's how that worked. And I can't really be dissuaded otherwise, and I will just get increasingly more angry as we talk about it.
I'm going to agree and slightly, not even disagree, but kind of defend him in a sense. He was leaving from Hawaii, so his options to like fly to places, I think from Hawaii, like direct flight, he still could have went to Japan. He could have went to South Korea instead of Hong Kong. But definitely Russia is the second spot. Yeah, that is – I mean, they're just using him for propaganda against us.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking – the enemy of your enemy is not really your friend sometimes, I mean, Putin is homophobic, has, basically allowed for, gay concentration camps in Chechnya under his protege. So, and he's also authorized, massive bombing campaigns in Syria. So, like, to have this guy, like that he went to that guy does not make it again like he's a real friend of like freedom, democracy, or anything like that. It's just basically 2 assholes in the room going after each other. And I think that Snowden, again, if he was an asset, but again, I think he was. If he wasn't, then again, like you really can't trust anything he says at this point because his entire lifestyle is like centered around like making sure that Putin doesn't happen a terrible car accident or something like that. Which again, like there would be no way to ascertain, right? If like all of a sudden you read the news, oh, Snowden, fell down the stairs. It was really icy in Moscow. You never know what the truth was.
I
So
know that it is icy in Moscow. I know that. And I also know
well, thank you, Bill. Yeah, it could be icy Moscow sometimes. Sometimes I hear they have kind of chilly weather. I don't know. I've never been there.
I have not either. I know people who have. They say it's very cold. Um, so phase one of the election week is the first week, and phase one of the election are done. Joe Biden, by all accounts, has won the election by legal standards, but we are now on phase two, which is Trump Boogaloo. Um, please explain to me, because clearly you know this stuff better than I do. What is Trump's plan right now? What is his plan to stay in the White House?
To me, it's not 100% clear what his point is. It could be just petulance and narcissism, in delusion, that he can't accept defeat. But there's been already a lot of signals all over the place in the GOP where some of these people are thinking about, and I think that, again, maybe Trump has signed off to this, that, Americans are a little bit still confused about how our political system works. For example, for the longest time, people thought that whoever gets the most votes wins. It's like, no, that's not true. Actually, it's not the most popular votes. It's the most electoral votes, as we've seen in 2000, 2016. So we've kind of had to educate the American people that, yes, the Electoral College actually means something. Now we're in another phase of education where I think Trump and GOP allies, as again, like Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, I think the governor of Florida, Rick DeSantis, or Ron DeSantis, whatever his name is, they've all been talking up and down about how, and this is according to the Constitution, absolutely correct, the state legislatures are the final authority when it comes to allocating the electoral votes of every individual state. Now, every state in the union has made sure that there's laws on the books saying that the electoral votes are allocated based on the popular vote inside that state. Does that make sense so far what I'm talking about?
Yes.
A little bit into the weeds with this stuff. Okay. So what happens next is that the state legislatures at this point, if they're controlled by Republicans, the idea is that they can at any time, according to the Constitution, basically ignore their own laws that they set up in their state and actually take back control of the electoral college votes and then put in a slate of electors for their state that can go to the electoral college and vote the way they want. So in this case, if they're Republican legislatures, they can vote for Trump electors, and those Trump electors will go to electoral college and then can give them the win. And it seems like there is really, like, this has not just been idle chatter. And also I've seen articles like way before the election was over talk about this as a possibility. And I think this is what Trump is kind of clinging on to. I think someone gave him this idea and is playing with it. The lawsuits are just nonsense, and they know it's not going to go anywhere. But they want to muddle the waters, and they want to have extensions and delays just enough so that the state legislatures in these certain battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, potentially Georgia, have enough political cover to go like, look, we don't know what happened. There's some kind of weird fraud going on. It's a grand scheme. Alan West, who ran for Congress, won for Congress, I think got defeated later, and is now the chairman of the Texas Republican Party, said that there was a grand scheme played against the American people. So they need this smoke screen and this mud to kind of get tossed into the atmosphere. And then I think that gives them enough cover to kind of pull this BS where they're going to be like, you know what, we can't accept the popular votes anymore. We're going to have to go with this, the state legislatures are going to go with who they thought actually would won. And I think that's the game plan. Now, again, this hinges on a couple of factors. One, the legislators are going to have the guts to actually do this in the first place because almost immediately their office buildings are going to be burnt down. And then two, Trump having the guts. And Trump has kind of been more gutless than people realize. He's not been like the tough guy authoritarian by any means, in the sense that he can go against actual opponents who could fight back easily. It's one thing to hit protesters with tear gas, or send out DHS agents against 40-year-old mothers in Portland. But if there's other kind of enemies that are a little bit stronger, he might be just a giant chicken shit. So again, it hinges on those kind of things. But I think that's what's happening. I think again, and by the way, too, people are saying oh, Trump is just sitting in his White House stewing and just being idle. There was a whole thing where they put out an order where they were preparing the budget for February 2021, which is a big endeavor. That's a lot of stuff. And also the GSA administrator is basically saying that they're not recognizing a transition at this point. So again, that takes actual effort a little bit. I mean, I know for Trump, he's bottom of the barrel when it comes to actually exerting himself, but if you actually put out those orders, you got something coming up. And also you made sure that your Secretary of State came out and said that we need to go for a second, or we're preparing for the transition to a second Trump administration. So again, there's a lot of stuff he's actually kind of sort of working on. I know people are kind of focusing on oh boy, that was the end of the Trump campaign when Giuliani showed up at the Four Seasons landscaping company, but I think that's just one glitch. I think they're doing a lot more stuff behind the scenes, and I think I just had the feeling deep in my gut that when everyone was basically celebrating the end of the Trump administration, I'm like, no, this is like when you thought you killed a monster and we got 20 minutes left of the movie. Which, by the way, I saw someone else tweeted that. I didn't really come up with that thought process, but I always had that kind of feeling that again, this isn't over yet. But that's the best way to explain it. We still got 20 minutes of runtime in the movie called 2020, and the monster we think is dead, but I don't think it is.
He also has been firing key people in his cabinet and in departments that seem like I am setting up a coup.
Well, especially the biggest one is the defense secretary. The day after the election, he fired his defense secretary, who was the one guy who did not want to authorize using U.S. troops against the protesters during the Floyd riots. So that kind of tells you that something's up, because why do you just go out your way to pick that guy, a day after the election? If you're just kind of playing around and bullshitting, you probably just let that guy on because you're not planning anything. But I think he is planning something. And, when you start looking at international news sources like The Guardian or even the Times of India, they're all kind of saying is a coup possible? And this is happening in the United States. I think that what happens though is that people are kind of caught in a cultural lag where it goes back to this, was it Upton Sinclair? I want to say Sinclair Lewis, but Upton Sinclair, very famous novel from the 1930s called "It Can't Happen Here," and it was all about that there could be a fascist takeover in the United States. Yeah, Upton Sinclair, "It Can't Happen Here," just to be clear. And that's an interesting novel too, because that was about a loudmouth populist who was talking about immigrants who was going to make America great again.
Jeez.
So, yeah, so again, that happened, and it was again for the 30s. It was very striking because again, fascism was on the march. I mean, you had fascism take over Japan, Germany, Italy, and then launch the bloodiest war in human history. And so but the whole point of Sinclair's, or I should say, the thesis of Upton Sinclair's novel was that Americans really can't believe it would ever happen here. Hence the title, "It Can't Happen Here." And I think it very much can. And I think that we're closest we've ever been. But I feel like we're all kind of sleepy walking into it just a little bit. And again, it's the easiest coup in the world because it's not about tanks in the streets, by the way. Sorry, not to keep, making this a monologue, but it's not about tanks in the street per se. It's more about the fact that you can manipulate the American political system, just like Trump has always manipulated the legal system in the United States. you can manipulate the political system into making this actually happen. So again, like this could look very legal. This is also why I don't think the military would ever get involved, because you can have the electors come in, set up by the state legislatures. They can come into the electoral college to vote in Trump. Of course, before that period, with that little window, that will be challenged right off the bat. It gets challenged, but there's only one court in the world that can actually adjudicate this. That court is the Supreme Court. That court has been stuffed full of Trump people, and that's the end of the show.
All right, bottom line. Who will be president 6 months from now?
If I had to make a bet,
Which you are, holding you accountable.
Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna have to say it would be Trump.
Gosh, that is scary to think about. That is, maybe I'm naive and still think he'll be Biden, but I don't know why I think that. 70% of Republicans believe the election was rigged.
Yeah, and I think but when I say Trump is president, I also do think that all of a sudden there's going to be some other presidents in other parts of the country too. But what's considered the rump of the United States could be Trump. And again, like, you know, I'm just going off of, I guess I'm trying to hedge my bet a little bit because, again, like, you know, I feel nervous, like, you know, talking to record about this kind of stuff. But I do honestly think that that's what's going to happen. We're not done with this guy. This guy is facing an avalanche of debt and legal issues. And he has been really good about basically bending the will of the GOP. Like before, you know, what's that?
I said absolutely he has.
Yeah, because I mean, it's just, you know, he's already spread the conspiracy theory that the election was rigged. So the rank and file Republican registered in the United States, they're already buying this. So then he's just going after the individual like officials to kind of bend his will, or bend them to his will, I should say. So what makes you think he's already pulled this off before? I mean, like he's basically redeveloped the GOP under his will beforehand. Like, you know, him taking a crap on the allies, you know, talking up like Putin, having to sit down with Kim Jong-un, all this stuff Republicans supposedly would, you know, throw themselves under a train before they would ever do this stuff. He's made happen. They had to back up tariffs. Tariffs were never part of the program. Last time, like, Republicans were for tariffs was like 1890. So he has completely kept doing this over and over and over again. And so what's make us think that in 2 more weeks that all of a sudden you're going to have like even more Republicans come out and say like, yeah, you know what? I think that we should need to, you know, we don't need a popular vote anymore. It's in the Constitution.
It's the fact that we are even having this conversation. Even if there's a 5% chance Trump is president after this, that should be a wake-up call to everybody.
Well, it just basically means like the American dream is dead. Even though I think it was dead a long time ago, but I think officially people will start paying attention to that, number one. Number two, I think the idea of the union is dead.
Absolutely.
Because there might be a rump USA, you know, like, but I really don't see like the West Coast and maybe some other states actually keep going on with this kind of stuff because of the fact that it'd be so egregious at this point. I mean, this is basically like our, to give you a historical like assessment, this is the equivalent of like the August 1991 coup in the Soviet Union. Again, the coup failed, by the way. I mean, like, you know, obviously it did because there's no Soviet Union, but when that coup collapsed, it basically collapsed the entire idea of like maintaining the Soviet Union. And I think this would be the equivalent too. If Trump pulls a coup, if it works or it doesn't work, if he does something along those lines of like, perhaps not military force, because I don't think they would ever do it like that. I think it would just be basically BS in the Constitution, having the Supreme Court sign off on it. But either way, it would basically just destroy any kind of belief that we can maintain this system as it is. And I don't think that's a bad thing, to be honest. I mean, like, there's, again, like, you know, how many wars, how much deficit spending, how much more lack of healthcare for our citizens, how many more, like, you know, increasing police state kind of use of force. I mean, like, at a certain point, you know, other people can't get on board with this anymore, and like they want to go down this kind of fascist route to destruction, some people should start looking for the lifeboats, which is, say, for example, California, or even like a California, like as part of some Western Union. I mean, we already kind of saw that with like COVID-19 crisis. Like, for example, just remember Gavin Newsom was talking about the Western States Pact, about how to reopen and certain things, but I think it's still in force. It's not really talked about anymore, but it was for a brief second. Same thing with New England.
Yeah. I said it at election night, and I'll say it again. The real winners from the election are the independence movements. No matter what happens, Trump had 69 million votes, increased his vote count by 5 million.
Yeah, I think right now he's standing around like 70 or 71 million. And yeah, Biden's about 75 or 76 probably.
You have that. You have Mitch McConnell, who's still going to be running the Senate. You have a Supreme Court that is, although I got to admit, right now the Supreme Court says they're going to hold up Obamacare, which I'm shocked at. They might be saying all these things just to get people relaxed, and then when they drop the Trump bomb that Trump's still president, people will be like, well, they did support Obamacare, so maybe they're being fair and honest. But
yeah, that's what I kind of think too, to be honest. I think that's part of they're doing some head fakes. I mean, again, we could be deep into my own paranoia about this, but I think that's kind of the thing, because like, oh well, it's again like we can give Trump some more time and like more abilities to take down some of the bigger things. Obamacare is a small setback. For example, like Roe versus Wade. What was the gay marriage one? Obergefell versus Hodges.
That sounds right.
Yeah, it could be wrong, but yeah. Anyway, like if we can knock those two down, it's just like we'll take your stupid like half-ass whatever that was healthcare system.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And gosh, nothing is going to fundamentally change if Biden does hold on and become president. Yeah. Because there's going to be Mitch McConnell has already said he is not going to pass any of his cabinet members through the Senate. So we're going to have no government. There's going to be, gridlock isn't even the right word. Our government is going on strike, basically. The Republican Party is going on strike, and we're not going to be able to get anything done. And
I think that's about right. I think it's just that we are already in a stagnant system, and I think it's just that we have these old men who are just holding up everything. Old women too. Nancy Pelosi is no gem either.
Gosh, she won by 80% against Buttar, who happened to be, I think, he had some scandals in his past, but I don't even buy them. Was the super progressive, like, man who walked the walk kind of guy, and he only got 20% in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's whatever it is. I think the system is basically a gerontocracy. Again, I always belabor the point when I talk about this with people, but I think the parallels are pretty clear that, it's, again, just like the old Soviet Union. It's like these 70 and 80-year-olds who are very much out to lunch, who don't understand how society is changing, have no ability to try to reconcile the issues and contradictions within the society. And they're just marching along pretending that, again, it is an era 20 years before. And I think that, we are in our own era of stagnation. We really have not had too many advances. Besides the impact of like gay marriage, let's really try to think about, has there been any more has there been any increase of like living standards, or has there been a decrease? Has there been any increase of like life expectancy, or has there been a decrease? Are we feeling like we're in a better society, or do we feel like more people are again, more addicted to substances and basically just giving up? And also, again, I would just say we're in a total era of stagnation, which again is another, I've not said this already a million times, this another Soviet Union talking point, because look at our pop culture, for example. We're talking about Star Wars. We're talking about superhero movies, and we're talking like, reboot after reboot. Roseanne came back, and then it became The Conners. There's other million examples of like, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure Part 3 now, which I'm sure actually I heard was a good movie, but that's besides the point. That's just like, again, how many reboots can we keep doing over and over again? It's just the fact that every elite media, political, art, whatever, we're just recycling over and over again. We have no new ideas. And I feel like we're getting like, even our clothing, like, when you look back in like the 20th century, you can see the clothing music has changed from decade to decade, all the way up until about 2000. Right. So like, you understand like in the 60s, there was, or excuse me, going back to like the 40s, there was a certain look. The 50s had a certain look. 60s had a certain music, certain look. 70s had, again, that, very garish looking crap. The 80s, which everyone is going, nostalgia nuts about, had a very distinct look. The 90s
sucked ass, by the way.
What's that?
80s sucked ass. 1990s for life.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a little more of a coin toss for me. I see what you so eloquently put point was that it sucked ass, but it sucked ass for anyone who wasn't as a white male, basically, which is kind of most of the century anyway. But
we need someone from California or Cascadia who's got a heroin addiction to bring rock and roll music back, or grunge.
A little grunge back, yeah.
We need a little depression.
80s was all coke, and I feel like that's more positive, life affirming. But anyway, but what I mean? It's just like there was always changes and fluctuations, and like it wasn't trying to recycle things over and over again. And it seems like right now we're just like there's nothing really new. We're just going to go back and back. They're even talking about like an Indiana Jones movie again with Harrison Ford, who was about 99 at this point. So I mean, this kind of we're running down the same lanes as like the other superpower that died on this planet. And, if Trump really attempts like a coup by force, or again, I think more realistically, a legal push kind of stuff, the country is going to crack. It's done. It's just, again, you bottle up all these forces for years.
Well, I'm going to steer us back on track. But before I do that, I'm going to I'll give you an uplifting story, or an uplifting thought of the day. My daughter is in a thing. She is now what's called a visco girl, where she wears like very simple clothes, loves scrunchies for her hair. But the main thing about visco girls is they're very environmentally conscious, and they care about sea turtles. So my daughter is all about like not using plastic straws, and like conscientious about plastic in general. And she's caring about the ocean. So I'm hoping my daughter's generation will keep it real. And yeah, I'll say the other thing about you're talking about.
I like that, by the way. I think that I see that a lot more too with like people younger than me that actually they kind of give a rat's ass about the environment.
I will say, and I want to add one thing on to what you're saying with art and stuff. And this is more towards censorship, but along the lines, comedians can't say anything offensive anymore. Like comedy is all but dead. Like they're trying to cancel Dave Chappelle for his monologue on SNL. And I don't know. This is coming from a person who loves offensive jokes. It scares me that censorship isn't coming from the right anymore. It's coming from the liberals. And bring it back. California, I think what I've learned from this election too is California is not progressive. It's liberal. Like when we look at the props that didn't pass, and by astonishing numbers,
Yes.
Prop 15, cash bail, like failed spectacularly. Uber, I thought was gonna be close. It wasn't really. The California National Party, and I think we've said this before, has to become the second party for California. The Republican Party in California, besides a few gerrymandered districts, is dead. The Green Party, which I like a lot of people in the Green Party, but they're not doing a good job recruiting people and running successful campaigns. Let's just be honest.
No, I think the Green Party is a dead issue. I think that party is deader than Dillinger, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I knew some people in the Green Party who were actually kind of prevalent in California, and they all became Democratic Socialists of America, basically, because the Green Party had a lot of issues with like inner corruption and sexual harassment, a lot of like crap that was going on behind the scenes, and so like that's deader than dead. If I can just go back before we kind of skip through too many points, the comedy thing is overblown, I think. I know people, it usually is kind of like an easy thing. It's like, oh, the people are trying to get this person, blah, 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 like canceled. And like, there's a cancel culture and stuff like that. Well, yes and no. But like, certain things are like, we're kind of like off the wall. Like and Dave Chappelle, like, I don't know exactly what in his monologue was going to like, tell people that, that, he should be canceled. But there is like, it is kind of the market. There is no left-wing censorship kind of thing. I know that gets used as like kind of like a trope, like all of a sudden, like all the left-wing mob came in, but it's like really that's kind of like the market speaking.
Yeah, it's not government. It's
no, but again, it's just, and it's not like I don't know. Like for example, let's also back up too for a second. Like Dave Chappelle welcomed on stage at one point. This has nothing to do with his monologue, but like he welcomed on stage Louis C.K. Now Louis C.K. basically sexually harassed women constantly. Tried to make it a weird movie that was trying to explain that behavior that no one saw because he basically be yanked out of theaters the same moment he got exposed. And then on top of that, actually had his manager kind of threatened the women to silence or else they'll ruin their careers. And Dave Chappelle said, yeah, that's okay. I'm cool with that. Louis C.K.'s a fun guy. No, he's not a fun guy at all. Again, like that's kind of crap. So there's some of these things are a little bit more questionable to me. And also it seems like there's older comedians who are like, oh my God, it's such a PC culture. I'm not getting the kind of fans. Well, if that's the case, if America's like super PC, then how come like the #2 TV show, which hasn't been on in 20 years, The Sopranos, is big on HBO again? Is that really the PC show? Was that really like again the progressive, lovely show?
I don't think progressives watch that, or I don't think liberals watch The Sopranos.
You know what? I run with very socialist communist circles. Guess what? That's the biggest show they watch. Everyone's watching Sopranos. Again, that's anecdotal as hell, I know, but like I'm just saying, like they're quoting and we're quoting back and forth Sopranos references. So.
How about this? I believe The Sopranos could be watched by Bernie Sanders supporters, but I don't think Nancy Pelosi supporters watch The Sopranos.
Well, that goes into a different angle of like kind of that champagne socialism hypocrisy kind of stuff.
Yeah,
that's a true thing too, because there is like the what's her dumbass name? I can't stand her. Lena Dunham.
Yes.
Girl. Yeah, that kind of gets into that kind of territory. Now there is those types who rather virtue signal all day long than actually try to do the work to help out the poor. I would definitely say that there is, again, if we're gonna start splitting hairs here, the kind of like the upper class limousine liberal types, yeah, they're not watching Sopranos because it's too lowbrow.
I'll give you an experience from me personally. First time I ever went on stage to do stand-up, my first joke killed, like where the crowd was like in tears laughing, but it got censored. Where they didn't post it on a YouTube video. They took that part out of my act. It was literally making a joke about my son with autism, saying that like people assume all people with autism are like Goodwill Hunting, writing equations on the wall, when sometimes autism is a kid throwing his poop on the wall and getting banned from the Special Olympics. And that joke killed.
Right.
But they edited it out.
Well, again, it's just like in that crowd was probably a mix of people. They probably loved it, I'm sure, but there was some hand-wringing. There is a corporate. I think what people don't understand, maybe, and this is something I always kind of thought about, was that when it comes to like some of these kind of so-called censorship issues, is that corporate America is one of the most cowardly bastions in American life. And anything corporate is going to probably, or anything business wise, is so paranoid about offending anyone. Um, without any kind of like reason or like again any what is it yeah, there's no rationality in what their actions are. I don't think it's a groundswell of like all of a sudden it's like it's the left as a whole is coming out to like basically make sure that no one can make a joke anymore that is not completely 100% PC. But corporate America, like, they really just go back and forth about this stuff, and they hem and haw, and they sit in their boardrooms all day, and it's just like, are we going to lose 1% of our market share if we put this out? Okay, we're never going to do that again. I mean, again, the corporations are composed of the biggest ass kissing social climbers on the planet, so I'm not surprised about that.
I'm going to ask you a silly question. Looking back at if this is the end of Trump, which which you think it isn't, and I disagree, but I'm not like, this is not like Harlem Globetrotters versus the Generals. This is a real toss up to me. So, moving forward, let's pretend Trump is out. Him not being in the Trans-Pacific Partnership for the U.S., did Obama ever do anything as progressive as that in the 8 years he was president?
No, again, it kind of goes, actually, if we can roundabout back to your comments in California, the Democratic Party is not really the liberal party of America. It's actually kind of like the Libertarian Party. And anything that kind of like, at one hand, cannot smooch the ass cheeks of like, corporate America enough, but the other wants to make noises about like, we need to have more women CEOs. And I think that kind of sums up our California political system as well, because Obama was doing stuff that every corporation basically loved, but at the same time too, was uncomfortable with like police shootings and wanted to have like, again, more women, like people of color in the cabinet, blah, blah, blah. I think California is in that same kind of boat where it's just like, no, it's not really a liberal state. It's a libertarian state. I mean, it's just like, yeah, you can smoke all the weed you want. But when it comes to anything that affects the bottom line of a corporation, that's not happening in this state. This is still Reagan country when it comes to economics.
And like we said before, the propositions proved that 100%.
Well, people say that California is overtaxed in a lot of ways, and I guess it is compared to like the wastelands of like Texas and things like that. But I mean, there's so much where, again, like there's so many ways and loopholes where the mega rich in California are maintaining. I mean, there's a reason why, like Malibu is not like a ghost town all of a sudden. Like if it really was like this socialist, Venezuela like hellhole of California, the rich would have to pack their bags just like the rich always do in Latin America at the moment a slightly left-wing government comes into power. And
you know what, California?
Seen that.
Yeah, I was going to say California is really good at taxing poor and middle-class people.
Yeah, it's very aggressive in that regard. Again, it's just we're more kind of like a half-assed third world country in that aspect than anything else. I mean, it's just like, yeah, we're not going to execute the mentally retarded anymore, or we don't like to execute, period, because it doesn't look too classy. But that's mostly what we are. We're basically a banana republic out here with a one-party state that kisses ass to the rich and then makes some noises towards the poor and tries to look inclusive, but it really is not. And again, like with the one-party state that is now really kind of coming to fruition, the Republicans are no opposition. Republicans are just crazy yahoos who are just supporting Trump every which way they possibly can. So that's not an alternative, really. Because I mean, like, when you get down to it, like Gavin Newsom's this corporate Democrat, this wine slurping, liberal snob from, San Francisco. You have him on the one hand, which I'd rather take than, of course, I'm going to kick out every illegal I can by gunpoint and, close the schools in half the state because I want to, turn over everything to a privatized, Betsy DeVos kind of esque mega corporation that will create McDonald's of schools.
I agree. And, you separate Gavin Newsom the executive, the leader of California during this crisis, and you separate that from Gavin Newsom, the policy person. Gavin Newsom vetoed ranked choice voting. That tells me all I need to know about him.
Yeah, well, again, because they really the whole point of the Democratic Party now is to maintain power in the state. That's it. There's nothing else. They could totally flip their policies in a second, and as long as they just pretend that they're not Republicans, they'll be absolutely fine with it. Newsom is basically, how would you put it? Then again, this could be taken totally out of context. And you really have to think about the nuance for a second. But, like, he has done well in this crisis, I think. I think he was trying to do the best he can within the political system of California. And also the fact that the governor is not a king and can't just rule by fiat. He has to go through the courts. He has to go through, like, again, respecting local laws, the county laws, et cetera, when it comes to health. I think he's done really trying to do a damn good job about it. But kind of just like, and again, I'm not saying he's Churchill, but I'm just saying this as a kind of a parallel. He's a good wartime leader, but the moment the shit settles down, we need to have someone like like a labor socialist take over and actually start trying to fix things for the peace front. And again, that's a very esoteric allusion to Clement Attlee, the socialist prime minister who took over after Churchill. Who, when the UK public was like, Churchill, you did a great wartime job, but you have no idea what the hell you're talking about when it comes to housing and healthcare, so get out. And I think that's what we should do with Newsom. But again, with the way it is right now, Newsom will probably just again, go towards. He's up for a second term, right? So
yeah, and he's gonna win.
Yeah, he's gonna win. Yeah, I mean, because Republicans are just gonna put out, I'm sure either a token candidate of nothing, some person of color, or again, they'll just put out some kind of like, again, Yahoo, some nutcase who's just going to basically try to trump the entire state. And, we're just going to talk about build a wall against, New Mexico and completely have no point whatsoever. So, yeah, Newsom will get in the walk.
Yeah, after this episode, I want to, at least for us, we had to talk about the election and national politics. We just, we had to. Like, I'm looking forward to, like, really digging deep on state issues and, like, talking to, like, specific people. I was bummed. We had a great candidate up here named Jackie Fielder. She was running for state senate, and she ran against a neoliberal who's, like, beloved. And she did really well. There was a few, I don't know what congressional district you're in, but congressional district 34, there's this guy named David Kim, who was kind of an unknown, who was super progressive. I think he got 47% to like 51% from the establishment neoliberal Democrat. So there are pockets. I mean, the hope is we have to fight for state reps and state senators and even local people on local boards just so they can build up experience to run for state rep and so on. So my focus from here on out, at least for the next 3 years, is going to be state politics, which I know isn't as sexy as national politics, but I think that's where we're going to go. I want to interview local candidates, newspaper people, laser beams.
Well, I think that's good. Yeah. I mean, I feel that, again, we're kind of at a crossroads that we have not, we don't know which direction the country's going as yet. Now, like if Trump pulls his crap, we probably will never be able to shut up about national politics. But if Biden does actually get in, it would be good to focus on the California National Party and the California independence movement actually supporting local candidates to basically combat the Democratic Party machine. Because again, like people will be revolted to vote for Republicans, and rightfully so. And I think that that would be important at that point to kind of like, what the Scottish National Party did and what we're modeled after is like, kind of show that we actually know how to do government and actually can provide alternatives. And I think that would be a very good thing. But again, part of me, if I had to bet, and again, it really is kind of more of a coin toss than a sure thing. I think we're gonna see Trump. The monster's coming back. The movie's not over yet, guys. But again, I could be totally wrong. It could be just my paranoia being fueling everything. I feel like, every time I walk outside in 2020, I look around and just keep thinking, it's like, when is the other anchor going to drop on our head?
He'll be crazy. And I think we were talking in the leadership meeting tonight about, just ways, what's all the scenarios. And one thing that I brought up no matter what is if the California National Party, or say California was independent during this pandemic and our party platforms, got in, Medi-Cal for all would have saved thousands of lives. A negative income tax, universal basic income would have saved lives because people wouldn't be itching to get out of the quarantine. They could stay, they could order their food, online or whatever they need, stay in their house. We would have been done with this pandemic months ago. I mean, I guess we still would have had problems with Americans coming through our border, although I suppose we would have been better about that too. But if our policies were in place in California, we would have been done with COVID like the rest of the world. It's getting embarrassing to be an American, knowing they're like, oh, this is our third wave. And I try to explain to people, no, this is still our first wave we're riding. We're going to have another wave after this. Just the results.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it is embarrassing. We should all be embarrassed. We should be all be horrified. I think that we actually grew numb to how bad this was. This is losses of people on a level of World War I. And again, we had our biggest day today with 140,000 new cases. That is basically an entire city infected. So, yeah, we should be embarrassed. And you're absolutely right. If we actually had an independent California, we could have closed the borders. We could have done all of what you just said. And we could write this out just like, again, Taiwan, Japan, again, Canada could have done. Again, we would have saved a hell of a lot of people here. But again, because of our stupid, backwards-ass federal government that is screwing up everything constantly with our degenerated, ridiculous political system, we've been stuck with this knife in our throat forever. And again, it is completely at the point that if you're not upset about this and you're just thinking, again, that, this is something we can just mosey through, you got to wake the F up. Because, again, this is really been people's lives, and we can live better than this. Instead of this absolute nonsense. I mean, think about this. Me and you are sitting around on a Wednesday at 10:42 p.m. in the PST, and we're just talking to each other about if this maniac moron who somehow scooped up 70 million votes, a bunch of scared bunch of yokels, we're thinking he's going to actually do a coup and basically destroy the last vestiges of American democracy. We're thinking about it. Even though this guy's a clown, again, he is irresponsible, he is corrupt to the core, and we're having to sit around here go, well, what is this guy going to do next? What the hell do you mean? I don't want to have any kind of creature like that in charge of me ever again. I think, again, this has made me more wanting to have California independence than anything else. Because, again, yeah, Gavin Newsom is a corporate snob. He's like every CEO jerk-off I've ever had to work for. But the fact is that when it came down to it, he actually gave half a rat's ass about human life. This guy doesn't, and he's going to continue not to do so. And we're going to have a dark winter because of this asshole. Because even if Biden comes in and actually, is completely 100% certified the winner, which he should be in any normal democracy, but we still have to wait. We have 2 months and change until that transition for Trump to get out of office. And during that transition time, we're going to still have more dithering, more denial, more death. And why? Why do we need to keep doing this?
No, and, another thing we didn't hit on, but to me it's fascinating. There are going to be more QAnon members in Congress than there are Greens, Socialists, and Libertarians combined.
Yeah, and that's great because again, they're not just redeveloping Nazism for the 21st century. So yeah, that's fantastic. QAnon is all that is basically the blood libel used against Jews during the 1930s, but revamped for something Hollywood celebrities, something politicians, not exactly anti-Semitic, but again, somehow there's a pedophile cult that's going around and like murdering children and doing stuff weird.
I mean, the cannibalism part is straight out of the movie Ravenous, where like these people are eating people to gain vitality. One of my favorite movies of all time, so I do respect that about QAnon, but they are lunatics, and they have an influence now on our lives. There is a lady who believes in Pizzagate, who, believes all these things, who her vote, even though she's the Georgia representative, her vote matters to us and affects our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's crap. I mean, like, my friend who lives in D.C., and I'm sure any right winger who decides to listen to us ever, will probably say like, well, this is going to prove that Forbes is part of the deep state too, because he knows a person who went to a pizza parlor once. My friend used to go to the Comet Pizza Parlor, right? And because it was right down the street from him. And some guy showed up with an assault rifle and put a couple shots on the ceiling because he wanted to free the children in the basement of a place that doesn't have a basement. So, like, that could have turned ugly. Like, my friend could have showed up for pizza one day and got his head blown off. And, yeah, that's the kind of reality we're doing with the generated, ridiculous politics of the United States, which I don't think the rest of the world or, again, even Americans really understand how bad it's gotten. Like, this is bad. Like, again, we need all to kind of, like, get really woke, for lack of a better term, and really understand that, like, no, the system is completely nuts now, and we're inching towards either, like, a breakup, which would be not a bad thing, or, again, potentially, like, civil war.
All right. What percentage, and I'm not going to hold you to this, but what percentage of Trump supporters do you think would be capable of violent domestic terrorism if things don't go his way?
Now, I just want to be clear. What do you mean if it doesn't go his way? Like, for example, does he give up and walk away?
Biden becomes president, Trump kicks and screams his way out, never concedes the election, says it's rigged. What percentage?
I think it would actually be kind of a low percentage at that point.
Give it to me. What's your percentage?
Well, I just want to be clear about the parameters here. What I'm trying to say is that, for example, in the scenario you have said, this would be clear. Biden has been certified, right?
Like, he has.
Okay, and so Trump may bitch up a storm, but he leaves.
Forcibly left, like escorted out by Secret Service.
Okay, but he's not like the military didn't come on the streets. There's no tanks in the streets, right? We're just talking that Secret Service basically said it's noon on the 21st, so you have to leave.
Trump takes a private jet to Russia where he claims he is still president of the United States.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Then it would just be really kind of like a nutcase, like subcult. It would be like not even like a percentage. There'd be people who like just like the guy like the MAGA bomber. Do you remember him?
Yes.
Yeah, like there'd be those kind of elements, and then maybe a couple nuts would try to like shoot up like a Congress building. But
so let's say, would you say like 10% of 1%?
If even that, yeah.
How about 1% of 1%?
Yeah, something like that. Because like it'd have to be pretty low. The reason why I'm saying that is that like the white right kind of likes to talk a pretty big game sometimes. But if that's actually the scenario you lay out, they'll totally just crap out because again, he basically just took off and run. So they're gonna look stupid. So like they're not going to do that much. There'll be a lot of talk before that, but they'll completely just go again. It's like a fire in the wind. It's just there'll be like one guy might try to mail anthrax at Nancy Pelosi's office, but that's really about it.
I'll tell you, if 1% of 1% of Trump supporters go to violence or domestic terrorism, that would be 7,000 people.
But yeah, okay, so, but I don't even, okay, if you want to say that, like, honestly, I don't think it'd even be 7,000 people. I think it's way below even that.
I'm just doing the math of 70 million people. 1% of 1% is 7,000.
Well, I'll go lower than that. I would say about 70.
I will. I think we're gonna have at least a few thousand people out there like going.
They're a lot of chicken shits. They like to talk this game. They need to have some backing on it. Now, like again, we flipped the scenario where. I'll just go off. Like this is kind of go back to your point. It's like again, like if you have like again, if he does all this stuff and runs off, I mean, the right will talk all this game, but like no one's waiting for the the once and future president. They'll peter out pretty fast. I think it's kind of like I always think about like South Africa when it was transitioning from apartheid to democracy. The white right were swearing up and down, arming the shit out of themselves to like supposedly prevent Mandela from taking office, right? And they had one action where they came out with their guns and stuff like that. 3 of them died. I'm talking like 3 of them, but it's a very famous incident. It's the Bapu Tatswana, or whatever the hell you call it. Bapu Tatswana, yeah. There was a Bapu Tatswana incident where they were trying to intercede with force to prevent, it gets a little complicated, but they're trying to prevent this one part from rejoining South Africa, and it was going to try to it was trying to hold up the apartheid system if they actually held this little area called Bapu Tatswana. Anyway, it didn't work. They sent all these armed supporters in. It was like thousands, I think. It was like 1,000, 2,000, something like that. They sent them in with machine guns and stuff like that. It immediately turned into a farce. And then 3 of them got executed at the roadside by a police officer on live TV. You can look this up, and I'm sure I'm butchering that name, Bapu Tatswana, but you can look it up. There's also the AWB, which was like a white right terrorist organization that was very large at the time. They talked all this shit. Long story short, they talked a bunch of shit. They showed up in force. 3 of them died. They completely went to shit, and they never came back. So that could be that kind of scenario. So I keep thinking when you're saying it's going to be a percentage of 1% of 1%. They could talk that, but I really think it's just it really would just peter out so fast. It would just be that's over with. But if we go into this scenario in the opposite direction, where Trump holds on by the Electoral College, signed off by the Supreme Court, the military takes his orders, Biden is just standing around what am I supposed to do? Then his supporters will be encouraged to go after liberals, because then they feel like they got some real force behind them, because they actually do. That becomes more dangerous in my mind. And I think then you'll see more like Kyle Rittenhouse's mass shootings, again, potential assassination attempts against, liberal leaders. There might be encouraged by Trump. That means to me that could get into more violence, because they have the authority and the power of the state backing their motions. And I think then we get into really historically interesting, not to put a too subtle point on it, but we get into historically interesting territory where certain state governments might be like, hey, well, we're not paying attention to the orders of the federal government anymore.
Yeah.
Which could get, for us, not to be, selfish, but you could get into a situation for example, maybe, Californians would all of a sudden be like, you know what? Yeah, Trump kind of just screwed everyone on this election. So why are we going to ask him for wildfire money or anything anymore, or send money at all?
Well, on that note, I'm starting to peter, and I'm not bringing the heat like I should. You have been on fire, my friend. You're just like Dragon Ball ABC all the way to Z.
I'm all jazzed up about this. I'm full of pep.
Vim and vigor. I will say this, so we'll probably leave it on the podcast, but we got to start planning once this COVID's done. I'm thinking I might fly down or drive down to you.
Oh.
We will do a YouTube live bro trip.
Oh.
California bro trip, where we just do live podcast stuff from the car, stop at places of interest. Maybe we'll get some donors. Maybe we'll get some people at CIP who will help us out with cash money.
Okay.
And we'll just tour all the way up. And then once this is all said and done, we have to go to Cascadia. I need to go party with the Cascadian people.
They sound interesting as hell. I love the people we've talked to so far. That's been great.
We need to have like a mega jam session, but without the hippie bands. But just that energy, because like I'm getting stir crazy. I hear there's a vaccine coming. Like I want to like do something fun. I know, especially with California National Party. I know we talked about before. I know Lobes was saying we want to get a beer, which I think should, like I said, be free the beer. Like I want to have like us meeting like in a beer place, drinking beer or ale. I don't drink ale, but like I want to feel all revolutionary. I want to get out and have some fun.
Well, that was what the revolutionaries did. I mean, and again, it was like, where did they all meet up at? It was at pub after pub after pub. I mean, we have a beer named Sam Adams.
I'll tell you, I've had people, one of my old professors, his best friend was having his bachelor party. He was the brewmaster at Sam Adams.
Oh.
And he was telling me like his bachelor party was just on like a Wednesday night where they had the whole run of the brewery.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Oh my! He was telling me just like the professor's telling me about all the pool tables and ping pong, but like he's like, there are beers that you'll never see that I drank. Like,
hey, Bill, if you came down again, that'd be a great time. Honestly, you know, I love to do a Huell Hauser thing. It's like, so is this Rancho Los Alamitos? This is amazing. 1822, and you said this was part of Mexico. Yeah, yes, I've said that twice, Huell.
I'm down. I am down. So on that note, take her easy, and I'll call you soon.
All right, take care, pal.
Actually, I'll probably just call you right after this to tell you some non-podcast stuff. Talk to you later. Bye. Later, I mean like 2 minutes.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Well, there you have it. Another episode of the Free the Bear podcast. Thank you very much for listening. If you can, give it a thumbs up. Even if you didn't like it, give it that good old thumbs up and subscribe. I'm very old, but I've been told there is a bell that you're supposed to push or ding or something. So do that. For more information about the California National Party, go to californianational.party or on Twitter, vote_CNP. And in conclusion,
Free the bear. Grrr.